You're listening to the very first episode of Running the Voodoo Down here on BAMM.FM. My name is Micah Dubroy, and I'm the host and producer of the show. Thank you for downloading this podcast. I'm really excited to bring it out into the world. BAM and I have been talking about this for quite a while, and we're really proud of the program we've developed. The idea is to try to get a sense of what music is by digging into the minds of the people that make it their lives. I've been a professional musician most of my adult life, and one of the things I've noticed over the years is that there's a lot of really vibrant experiences and really intense reflection on what it means to be a musician and to make music, and it's not documented nearly enough. So this is my opportunity, and hopefully our opportunity, to dig into a little bit of what those things are and try to get a sense of what this life is and what music is. That might be lofty, but that's sort of the hope and dream here. We've got an episode today on what makes music work. We've got episodes coming up about playing with your siblings, about paying your dues and really taking your licks on stage, about what it takes to kind of let an album go. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we all listen to these records, right? We all listen to music. But I think if you're on the outside of the creative process, you don't always know what it takes to get from picking up a guitar or turning on a microphone to the finished product, whether that be the concert or the record. And from the inside, we don't always get enough of a chance, really, to talk about it with each other and to think about it publicly. So that's kind of what this show is about. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoy it. And please talk to us as much as you can. We want your feedback. We're really interested in what people want to hear and what they like. So please let us know, and hope you enjoy the show.
Check 1, 2, 3, 4.
You're listening to Running the Voodoo Down on BAMM.FM. Thanks for joining us. I'm Micah Dubroy, and today we have an episode that maybe addresses the most basic question you can ask about music. What makes it good? I know it seems extremely vague and maybe a little overly philosophical, and I know it's certainly an issue I spent most of my teenage years trying to decipher. But this question, what it is that makes a certain song or piece of music good, what makes it work, this general aesthetic question has to be answered practically, concretely, every single day by the people that make music. And especially at a time when so many of us appreciate such a broad variety of music, I thought it would be interesting to talk to a few different people whose jobs force them to have answers to these daydreamy questions. I have with me a singer-songwriter and a drummer who have worked together on some of the music you'll hear on this program today, and later we'll talk to a recording engineer and a conductor to get their perspectives as well.
Hi, my name is Jared Griffin.
My name is Andrew Laubacher.
Jared runs a band called Sioux City Kid, based out of San Francisco, and Andrew has worked with him along with many other artists of many kinds around the country.
It doesn't necessarily have to be the best playing. It doesn't even necessarily have to be the best singing or anything like that, but if it resonates somehow, if it makes you think of something or feel something or takes you kind of like on a journey, and the core of the song, whatever that core is, where it comes from, that idea has to be solid. It has to be built on like a solid foundation for it to be good. You can only polish something up so much, you know?
But what is it that makes a song solid? What is it that makes it good? Do we have to agree? Does it matter?
I think that to use the term good and bad in any kind of art is sort of misleading. So I think that I might think something's good and you might think it's not, but that doesn't mean either one of us is right or either one of us is wrong. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's like an answerable question, really.
I think it matters, yes. But, it doesn't matter. Like, if we're just talking like the three of us, if I like something and the two of you don't like it, well, I'll just believe that I'm right and you guys are wrong.
But that's the crux of it, right? Isn't there some level on which, when we love a song, we have to believe there's something universally great about it? If you don't like my favorite song, maybe it doesn't appeal to you, but you're missing out on something that's fundamentally good on its own, something that I can see in it, right? We'll come back to Andrew and Jared, but in the meantime, I'd like to introduce another perspective.
My name is Scott McDowell. and I am a music producer, engineer, and a studio owner. I run Hyde Street Studio C.
As an outsider, whether he's engineering or producing, Scott is hired to help make a song its best. It's his job to tackle this very abstract idea, make a judgment call, and give concrete results immediately.
Okay, so when I'm working with the band in pre-production as a producer, or also when I'm mixing, that's actually a question that I ask myself every time. Is what is it about this piece of music that is particularly exciting? Because I think what makes music good to some extent is there needs to be a certain degree of familiarity. I mean, everyone has a different kind of ratio of what they want, but there needs to be a certain degree of familiarity in terms of like, this is in a major key or a minor key or whatever. But then there also needs to be a certain degree of unexpected something, some sort of surprise. So it's like we're in comfortable territory. We know like what we're dealing with, but then, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And that freshness kind of makes it interesting. And I think different people have expect a different ratio or desire a different ratio, maybe even at different times. You know, sometimes we want to listen to really predictable, almost like guilty pleasure music, or like classic records from 30 years ago that, you know, at this point, you know, if someone did that today, it would almost feel cliche because like it's just been done so many times that way, but it still just feels good. And then other times we want really weird avant-garde, just like, you know, I would call it noise. And yet the truth is like it's only noise because like it hasn't really been like done to death. And as soon as people do it enough, they create these theories about what works and doesn't work, and it ceases to be noise.
That's one of the most interesting things, that what counts as good, not just as popular, but as good music, this evolves as time passes, as contexts change. Our experience of music is so intertwined with everything we've heard before, with who we are and what we're looking for, that the power of a song or piece can develop or decay, seemingly all on its own. Is there a level where it's just a matter of taste? Is there a point where we can say like, no, like really objectively, that's too much or too little or not right?
I don't
or do you
think
think
so.
it's just fundamentally taste?
I don't think so. I think as far as taste and where you draw the line with a lot of these questions, it doesn't matter. None of it matters. And I find in the studio, I see people overthinking a lot of this stuff, freaking out, thinking that there is a right way or a wrong way, but really there isn't. There's just like confidence and like execution and craft. Part of what we're getting hired for is that we've developed our own taste and we've developed our own sense. And some of that is like we kind of have a general sense of what we think people universally like and dislike. Part of it is our own personal taste. I have to like check my personal taste all the time on stuff that I work on to focus on either what I think the artist would prefer, or sometimes not what the artist would prefer, but what I think, you know, their fan base would prefer and what's going to do well for this artist, because I'm more concerned about their sustainability and their career than their own personal taste, and I'll fight them a little bit for it, even if it's not something I like either. You know, like you and I would both prefer this, but let's be honest, this is your third record and you need to go out and sell some of these, you know? So, and you're afraid that this thing is going to make it bad, but in reality, it's not going to be that bad. And it's like most people are just going to think it's hella cool.
I get the impression that knowing how these decisions play out is a huge part of what it is to make music. Here's Andrew again.
I've played with a lot of bands So that has informed me as far as like choices that work and don't work, because I see a lot of people make a lot of different choices. What I always try to do when I'm recording especially, but even if I'm just coming in to like learn tunes for a band, I try to figure out what the essence of like the core of the song is, like whether that be through the lyrics or the instrumentation or the vibe. I try to figure out what they're getting at and then just enhance that or support that feeling that's being put out. I find that even if I go into a situation and I'm not necessarily into what's being created, I sort of snake my way into a pocket of the song that I can find some kind of like inspiration from. And some songs you have to dig more than others. Some songs just right there. Oh, this is it. Perfect. Some songs it can take me all rehearsal to figure it out, or like it'll take me, we'll do the rehearsal and I'll record it and I'll listen to it and listen to it and listen to it and be like, oh, okay, I could do this thing, or there's this tiny phrase that makes me think of something. Like I'll just repeat that in my head and like try to come up with like something around that. So that's what I would say I do, is I try to dig into that whether it's the entire song or like a corner of the song. You try to find that space within it that makes sense to you and that you fit in and that you think you can embellish and enhance and support and all that kind of stuff. Especially as like a sideman. Like as a songwriter, it's much different, but as like a sideman or someone who's filling in or someone who is playing a supportive role in the band, which as a drummer especially, it's a very supportive instrument. Yeah. You know, that's what I try to have to like look for.
I'd hire you. Again. That's a good spiel. I would hire you. It's like, man, that's a great, man, that's what I'd want a musician to play on my songs. I'd want to find where you fit best and support.
That enthusiasm for finding where you fit, picking the right moments, the right people, it's a common theme.
I often sit down when I start a mix. I sit down and I just listen to the song. And I try to think like, all right, what are the unexpected elements in here? Like I know what all the normal stuff is, but what are the unexpected elements? What are the moments of surprise? Or where can I create contrast or make it really exciting and jar the listener to wake them up and take them out of like autopilot listening mode to like paying attention mode? Aaron Kerbel did a recording with me once where he played the typewriter and made it swing so hard. And honestly, it's just a short moment in a song, but that moment like loops in my head all the time. I get stuck. Just the sound of him going, ching, you know, it's like, damn, dude, you got a backbeat. You got a pocket.
My name is Dave Möschler, and I'm a conductor and music director in the San Francisco Bay Area. I grew up in North Carolina and Virginia and moved out here, and I've considered this home for the last, 5 or 6 years. And I mostly work with theater companies, but I also founded and run Awesome Orchestra Collective, a high-level reading orchestra that also does a lot of musical adventures, so to speak.
I brought Dave onto the program because, as an award-winning conductor and musical director, he has a lot of experience with curating music and collecting and organizing musicians, as well as being extremely knowledgeable about music itself. The Awesome Orchestra really addresses a wide repertoire in an almost populist kind of way. We met while he was directing a tribute to Sly and the Family Stone, comprised of 9 different ensembles, and the decisions about programming, about which pieces are played, and how, by who, and where, these decisions must all be carefully aligned to produce the best music, the best performance, and the best experience for all involved. So I put the question to him, what makes music good?
Well, it's a worthy question. I'm not sure if I have a perfect answer, but I've spent many years thinking about that as a conductor and band leader and musician myself. Why am I obsessed with some composers like Frank Zappa and John Adams, but also can't stop listening to Jamiroquai and Sly and the Family Stone. How are those related, and why am I so equally obsessed with some of those? And instead of trying to pin it down to like some element of music, like I guess Pandora would do, to try and find a pattern with, you've got what I would call the 4 main elements of music. You've got melody and harmony, which are really an extension of each other. You've got rhythm, which kind of doesn't have a theory of its own like music does, but is so, I think, pretty fundamental in this question, or in any kind of attempt at an answer to this question. And then timbre, which explains a lot of different genres. One way that I would think of it, and I wish I had come up with this myself, but I can't. I have to give credit. One of my good friends, Ben Krause, who's a composer and music director in New York, was studying composition. And his teacher, who was a protege of Leonard Bernstein, said, there's really one test for music on whether it's good or not. He said, do you want to hear it again? Right? And I keep trying to find a crack in that well, it's a test, a litmus test. Yeah. And I really can't. And what's brilliant about that, that rubric, that way of measuring something, is that it not only applies to all music, but it explains all different kinds of music. And again, working in the classical world, but also like I grew up playing in rock and funk bands and was in a Spinal Tap cover band in high school. I mean, just like ridiculous stuff, and kind of going back and forth. I was a jazz bass player in college for a little bit, but my degree was in tuba playing, so really fell into orchestral music and musical theater specifically. Is that way of measuring music it explains everything, and it equalizes and normalizes all kinds of music.
To be honest, even though it's so obvious, I never really expected this. It's so simple and yet so significant, and it completely levels the playing field.
In the classical and orchestral world, people a lot of times say, well, it's very easy for people when you spend a lot of time in that world to think of that as superior, because look at all this 400 to 500 year history of counterpoint and theory, and all Western music is really based on us, and it's really superior to everything else. Now, I'm paraphrasing, not many people actually say that, but some people do feel that, and that's perfectly legitimate. That's the music they want to hear and play over and over again. And yet, music by the people, folk music or popular music, whatever term you want to call it by, that uses a different harmonic language. Some would say more simplified, others would say more elegant, I mean, if you look at Mozart and the Beatles, they used all the same chord changes, okay? Sometimes Mozart used less, but he used it in a different way. All these elements kind of all boils down to, does the person want to listen to it again? And it not only equalizes all different kind of music, but it also equalizes anybody's opinion about it. In the orchestral world, again, you have, absolutists and purists, and this notion that, like I said, that certain music is more advanced and therefore better. Like in evolutionary theory, I started out studying science in college and loved evolutionary biology, and it was one of my favorite courses and subjects. And there's this prevailing notion, and my apologies to any evolutionary biologists that might be listening, but there's this notion that, we're not necessarily moving towards complexity in evolution, and music, I think, follows that. I mean, what a great analogy to music, the idea of evolving and branching off, that funk music is not necessarily more complex than blues or rock, and hip-hop and rap are not more complex than reggaeton or musical theater. I mean, it's just they all share different elements. And so this idea that some music is better than others, this kind of litmus test kind of just, it does away with that. Like you hear hundreds of performers every year, bands, theater shows, orchestras, just listening to CDs every day and new stuff. And every time I hear it, I think, man, I want to hear that again. Or, yeah, I'll come back to that. Maybe I don't want to hear it again as much. Okay. And we can all relate to that. We can all say, yeah, there's that one CD or that one track that I just put on repeat, or that one record that I wore the needle out. I wore the groove out.
And that's what we're looking for, isn't it? When we put on a piece of music, we want something that will keep us coming back for more. that will keep on giving every time we return to it. We're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors, but when we get back, we'll start getting into some of the more broadly reaching elements that go into our experience of music.
Hey everyone, Phil here from BAMM.TV. I hope you're enjoying running the Voodoo Down. You know, BAMM.TV does a bunch of videos, a bunch of documentaries, a bunch of blog posts. It's a lot more than just audio programming. So you can check it all out at BAMM.TV. That's with 2 M's. All right, let's get back to it.
Once again, Mr. Scott McDowell.
This is one thing I've always found fascinating is a lot of the like classic, huge, like epic records that we think about from the 60s and 70s, like today, in the 60s and 70s, they were kind of just passing moments, you know? Right. Like they were cool records, sure, but they weren't like what the timeless masterpiece that they're thought of today. I mean, some of them, sure, they were marketed that way, but a lot of them were just whatever. But like their record labels who are making money off of this, you know, over the decades have continued to try to make money off of it by marketing it as this is a classic record. Right. This record came out and it's all everybody's been listening to for the last 3 decades. And it's like, well, yeah, now, you know, Black Sabbath has influenced a lot of metal bands, and, you know, and metal has changed a lot. So like even now you listen to Black Sabbath and you're like, this is what inspired this stuff. But at the same time, like, I don't think that like Black Sabbath was as respected at the time as being these like heavy dudes. I think it was almost like a little silly from what I've read and been told, like to a lot of people. Yeah. But like then like in the 80s, all these like really tough 80s metal guys were like constantly like talking about, oh, Black Sabbath was like the inspiration for us, you know, the influence. And now, you know, by the time I paid attention to Black Sabbath in the 90s, it wasn't a question. They were awesome, you know?
Yeah,
like, duh, dude, this is Sabbath. You know, you don't question that.
Well, retroactively things get canonized, you know, and like I think that there's always this reaching back, always in one way or another, or stuff that was like super popular or super important, nobody remembers. And that's almost the word, you know, like, and I can't name those records because I don't know them, but you talk to older musicians or older people and they're like, yeah, like obviously whoever, you know, like Sam Cooke was amazing, but this other guy was really the dude. Right. And then 10 years later, you know, 20 years later, whatever, the record company lost whatever, somebody didn't push it and none of you have ever heard him. Yeah. And it like maybe the musicians knew him for a minute and then disappeared. Maybe they didn't, like who even knows? But so much of that in both directions. And like a lot of the martyrdom that happens with musicians that have died young. Yeah. You know, people, I mean, my gosh. And not that they weren't huge, but like Nirvana, Marley, John Lennon. I mean, all these guys were big already, but it just, there's something
that
like...
If their careers had like slowly faded...
Would have been this, you know... Yeah. Yeah. And the huge, you know, just the way it goes back.
I think about that all the time.
You know? And like even, obviously everyone always loved Michael Jackson, right? But how people react to him since he's died has changed. Like absolutely. Suddenly everybody loves Michael Jackson. Yeah. And it's because he
stopped embarrassing us by dying.
Right. Well, that too.
For a while, it was like, yeah, I really like this, and I really want to tell people, but he's kind of become like this, you know, socially awkward, uncomfortable. I'm embarrassed to admit it.
Right. I mean, there's a lot there, but also it's just like suddenly he dies, and the way everyone's talking about him is everybody loved this guy, and suddenly, oh, everybody loved this guy. Great, I loved him too, you know? Or you either you let it out or you begin to embrace it, or it just becomes a part of you. And I think that happens to a smaller scale or a bigger scale, you know?
I mean, not us, you and I. Oh yeah, we're open about we loving MJ.
From the start, man. Personally, I'm immune to all of those things.
When I was in high school, like trying to get into jazz, I was riding around in the car with my friends listening to Jackson 5 like every day. That was what we were doing.
Your jam? Wow. Yeah. Well, I was not that cool in high school, man. I don't know if that counts as cool or not in high school.
I don't know if it was that cool.
But while we're on the subject of history, I wonder, say you listen to something like, you know, like Hendrix, like a classic Hendrix tune that just hits you super hard, you love it. Is there some way when I say it's good, like I feel like I mean it's just good, like no, I don't care who you are or where you're coming from, but there's just something about that's just good? Or is that not true? Like I feel like
I don't agree with you.
No.
And my reasoning being that I do think that there's a certain degree of conditioning that has to be done for it to be good. But everybody's going to be conditioned differently. Like, yeah, if you have heard enough like distorted heavy rock guitar, and if you're okay with the kind of like loose sense of time and like the way that the rhythm section breathes, then you're gonna hear that and love that. I do. When I discovered my dad's Jimi Hendrix cassette tape when I was like in 7th grade, that was all I wanted to listen to for like a whole summer. But again, it was like that was the right time and place for me to get into that, and it's like now something that has influenced how I interpret all other music that I listen to moving forward.
And I wonder how much of those moments, whether it's finding like a cassette tape or like when I was in high school, I was not a huge jazz fan. I was like 15, 16, had never heard much of it, was into like, alternative rock and roll, whatever it was that was popular at the time. But I was playing and trying to play seriously, and at that point you pretty much have to study classical or jazz.
Yeah.
And jazz seemed much cooler.
Yeah.
I'm 16, remember? And my teacher was like, you need to listen to this music. Like, I don't like practice.
I went through the same thing.
And you need to listen. And I was serious enough that I just sat down and listened to that shit.
Yeah.
And like, I didn't get it, and I didn't like it, and I didn't get it, and I didn't like it. And then suddenly I liked it.
Yeah.
And then later maybe I got it. But like,
what was your first record? The first one you liked?
Well, the one that it wasn't even a strictly jazz record. I kind of like hopped my way in. Headhunters. Herbie
Yeah,
Hancock.
that makes sense.
I was at a music camp, and some of the older kids played Chameleon. And I had never heard it, never heard any of that music. And it was like, all these like 18-year-olds. The bassist had like a 6-string bass.
Yeah, totally.
And they did like a 20-minute version, like and they were all like, talented players. And it just blew my mind.
Yeah.
I had never heard. I didn't know that kind of thing could exist. And I come back and my best friend's dad had a copy of it, and we just listened the hell out of it. So when I started sort of studying, and it just happened.
That was your like entryway in.
That was my entrance where I like loved Herbie, and I pretty much knew that record. I didn't follow it too much, but when I started studying, my teacher happened to be like, he was her favorite pianist.
Yeah.
We had this moment where she was like, "Oh, like follow this dude. Like, here's Maiden Voyage."
That's the beauty of jazz. You branch out on certain people that you like, and then you're like, this other record has the same drummer. Maybe I'll check that one out.
And she was like, here's this Wayne Shorter record, and here's this Miles record. And then it was just from there, I just went, And
for me, it was Lee Morgan's, not the Sidewinder, but another one, the Rump Roller.
I don't think I know that.
Which is just like Sidewinder.
Okay.
I mean, I think it was really like the label was like, we want another album that's just like Sidewinder.
Right.
And I didn't hear Sidewinder first. I probably would have liked it. But I heard the Rump Roller. And my buddy had been trying to get me into jazz. And here I was like studying jazz, but like not listening to any of it and trying to, but not getting it. And then the Rump Roller with its like goofy, funky, silly melody. And I was like, yeah, this is jazz.
You touched on something that I think is really interesting, what I call the virginal experience.
Yeah, this is Dave again. Dave Möschler.
For either seeing a show live or just seeing or first experiencing a record. I mean, I can remember the first time I put on an LP from my parents of Sly and the Family Stone's Greatest Hits. I just sitting there listening and saying, they have the melody in all different places in the band. They're all singing the melody, and there's women and men, and like they're passing everything back and forth, and it's a pop song, and it's got hooks, but then it's still going to these interesting bridges, and he's using diminished chords. I didn't know what a diminished chord was back then, but I knew it didn't sound like what other stuff sounded like. We can all remember the first time for music that really speaks to us. Well, it's part of the human condition. We can't go back to that. We can't go back to that innocence of not knowing what it's going to be like and experiencing it for the first time. And I think that's what we continually try and do, not to have virginal experiences again or recreate them, but to seek out different ways of, it's not like getting back to our childhood. It's not the same thing, but it's seeking out new adventures that we don't know that they're going to be some virginal experience. This is the other kind of, I guess, rule of thumb that I've learned as a conductor. I mean, I spend a lot of time programming music and saying, well, what do people want to play? Well, what do they want to hear? What do I want to play? What will push the boundaries? What will be familiar? And we ultimately, whether you're producing an event and trying to sell tickets, whether you're trying to send people on a musical adventure, people, they go to what they know. That does not mean everything is a new thing. At some point, every piece of music was a new piece. But we are creatures of habit. Another part of the human condition that very few times do people go out to shows except the truly adventurous among us. And even then, they've got some other prerogative towards wanting to come out. They go to what they know. It's not just the music that we know, it's the people that we know. It's especially true in the theater world. You have people that only prioritize and program the old classics, the war horses, whatever you want to call them. And then you have people that only want to do adventurous new stuff, which is great also. And what I've been really interested in is putting both next to each other, experiencing both the new and the old back to back, because it makes us more appreciative of that. And it makes the new not more exciting, but it puts it in context, and it makes us more appreciative of it in that way. And so hearing them both together is what I call the third thing. There's two things. There's one thing I want, and then there's something that somebody else wants. And we can't get to this third thing without each other. It doesn't exist without each other, without us. It's not about necessarily pushing each other in a certain ways. It depends on the relationship. But this third thing in music and performance that we just can't get without one another.
Andrew, the drummer, agreed.
To deny the roots of music in general, which is community-based, is going to be a disservice to you. So there should always be, you always need to be thinking a little bit about people. You know what I mean? Because, you're doing this with people and for people. You need to please yourself, but you also need to please others when they're listening to it. And it's really easy. I think it's way easier just to make something that you like that no one else does. It's really hard to make something that a lot of people get into.
If you just hear Concert of All Beethoven, again, that's pretty cool. But if you hear a piece by Beethoven, and then you hear a piece inspired by Beethoven written now by a living composer, boy, is that sure exciting. It sure puts things in perspective. For both pieces, it's that third thing. And something always leads to the next thing. Very few people just stay stuck and say, well, I'm only interested in funk music, and I'm only going to hear that. I'm only going to listen to that. And you could spend a lifetime doing that, but slowly but surely, some element of something else will catch our eye, and we'll want to hear it again.
Do you feel responsibility as a programmer, as a conductor, to kind of encourage that movement?
Absolutely. I think it's the most important thing that I can do. The most important thing is to not just program music that will make people happy or that they'll want to listen again, but that will sum up everything that I believe in. Again, there's so much music out there by dead white guys, and a lot of it's pretty good. But we need to hear music by women and people of color and the LGBTQ community, and not just for social justice reasons, but because their music hasn't been represented for years.
Right.
But guess what? They're just as talented as the rest of these old dead white guys, if not more so a lot of times. And so it's not just, the responsibility is not just an artistic one, but a social one. And yes, there are pieces that I want to play again and again, and that I could conduct the rest of my life and I think be pretty happy by myself. Will that make the world a better place? Will that make it a richer place? No. And so I think the responsibility lies in remembering that every good piece and bad piece was at some point a new piece. And it just existed in a person's head or a couple people's heads, and it had to have an outlet to be put in the world. And so as a conductor, an orchestra conductor specifically, I think about what do I have at my disposal? I have an orchestra. That is such a force of nature. 50 to 100 people getting together in one room to make music together in tune at the same time in the same place. Well, there's so many things working against us that it's a miracle every time we all get together. You probably feel that with band rehearsals sometimes, like, oh my God, we're all so busy. It's a fucking miracle that we're all together and we can make this awesome music.
I find it mind-blowing to get 7 people in a room together, much less 50.
Yeah. So that's why, an awesome orchestra, we have like a list of, it's like 500 people. So now, if everybody all showed up at once, that would be pretty exciting, but we wouldn't get much done. But when like 50 to 100 people show up, again, it's pretty exciting. And so the responsibility to program, I don't choose music that I don't believe in and that I can't get behind, that I don't think needs to be heard. I program music that people need to hear. I make a very strong point of only hiring people for my orchestra, or just inviting people to play, whatever the situation is, with good people. If you have one person in the room who has negative energy, I mean, we all know what that's like. That is toxic. It is toxic to us. Why? Because it gets in the way of us sharing something with each other, and everybody's, what will they say? And what's this weird dynamic with the concertmaster and the conductor, or the keyboard player and the horn player? And so, more power to those people who are really good, but I'm only interested in players that are fun to make music with. And yes, for certain music, you need people of a certain proficiency. I wouldn't hire somebody at the expense of that, but I absolutely would not hire somebody because I think I needed them for the group and they're playing, but not their personality. So it goes both ways. We need to share something with each other when we get up and perform, and having better music makes that connection even stronger, and having better musicianship, I think it's on the same side, and then having better people and an encouraging environment, which is what I was talking about, awesome orchestra before, and what we're all about, that will also make the musicianship better and the experience better. So it goes both ways of this sharing and this finding that third thing, or this experiencing this music together. The other thing that I think about all the time is, why do we make music? Why do we get up there and perform or rehearse with each other or write music? And it's to share something about ourselves with each other. Again, this doesn't matter what genre it is. Why do we go to the concert? Because we want to see our friends up there performing. It doesn't matter if we even know the music. The music doesn't even matter. I mean, how crazy for me that was such a big realization and such a kind of scary one. Because my job as a conductor for so long is I'm the composer's advocate or the arranger's advocate. I must interpret their music and think about that. No, we have to get up there and I want to program this music because it says something about how I think the world should be, because it will be fun to play together, because it's worth playing, because it has something to say, because we'll want to hear it again. But it's all for each other. As an orchestra conductor, I thought it would be a lonely road, and then I found out it's the most joyous road, because even though I'm the only one up there, usually for some gigs, I'm completely useless without other people, So I've come to realize this. I've been so grateful to have this realization early on, instead of at the end of my career, that the whole point I'm up there is to share something with other people, and to have them share something with me.
What makes music good? Community, history, curiosity, craft, love, the expected and the unexpected. Honestly, I don't think I can put it any better than David just did. I'd like to thank all my guests, Jared Griffin, Andrew Laubacher, Scott McDowell, and David Möschler. You can find out more about Jared at SiouxCityKidMusic.com. Andrew is at www.andrewdrums.com. Scott is at fadersolo.com, and you can find more out about Dave and his awesome orchestra at awesomeorchestra.org. The music today was provided by Sioux City Kid, Andrew Laubacher, Kelly McFarlane, Benjamin Andrews, and the Tectonics. As always, I am Micah Dubroy, and this has been Running the Voodoo Down on BAMM FM.